So this is the first part of the agenda where we're giving reports on what YPC has been doing for the past year. And so this is from our circles that now we call movement networks. And so basically we're going to describe the main projects that we've done, what we've accomplished so far, what we want to accomplish in the upcoming years, and really just overall what's been happening. And so we can go next to yeah, I'll go next. Okay, so how
So,
about I pass this to Deborah? Yeah.
so before we go into the reports, though, I want to say a little bit more about what we mean by movement network, and the community reports will also say more about this. But one of our biggest accomplishments this year is to reframe our thinking of YPC and not as a single organization, but rather we are a network of people, groups, and other networks working together towards the shared mission of building an intergenerational movement for youth-led collective impact. And so but how do we conceptualize, how do we make sure all these people, groups, and networks are working both self-organized, but also connected in a way that makes us do more together than apart? And that's why we think about how that there are actual parts to networks. There's the relationship network, which is a bunch of all the people that we know and we love and that are just coming in and out based on capacity and can connect people with people. And then there's the intentional network, which is, okay, these are the folks who come together to really, with a greater capacity and more hours, to really think through the entire system of youth-led collective impact and what we can do to move it forward. There's the action network, which is, okay, there's a project, we need to get it done, like New York City Community Boards. We need New York City Community Boards to be inclusive for young people, or Global Collab, we need people to come together globally. So what actions can we take? And then the support network, which is networks take support and work. We need leaders who can lead in a network movement-based way and in a generational way. We have communications platforms so that the entire movement network can speak to one another. We need money and time and space. So the support network is what's responsible for all of that, making the network stronger. And that brings us to the Youth Power Coalition Movement Network structure. And what you'll see here is that, the relationship network is, again, all of our wonderful people being connected to one another, from the people who are following on Instagram to the people who are organizing to people who are participating, like everyone here today. We've got our action groups, like in that orange, which I mentioned, the Global Collab, New York City Community Boards, also convenings, etc. And then the support network we have in blue, and thinking, what is it that movements need to succeed? And that's leadership development, so we can all lead intergenerationally, communication, so people have the information they need, community, so that we can all work together, fundraising and financial accessibility, and finally advocacy, so that all young people have decision-making power in spaces where decisions impacting young people are made, which is frankly everywhere. And so that's who we're going to be hearing from. We're going to be hearing from all of this different work. And back to Irina.
Yes, so I will now pass it to Jada to describe more on what's been happening with advocacy.
Hi, everyone. So advocacy, as we know, is advocating for youth power in spaces that lack them, so that young people can have the tools to gain things that are specific to them, instead of, having people that don't understand them and don't have empathy for them make the decisions, and empowering youth to make decisions for themselves. And some of the ways that we've been doing that this year include launching our community board strategy, community board advocacy strategy, in which we focus on education about community boards, making sure that we ourselves understand all of the components of what makes up a community board, the rules as well, and understanding that there's clearly a lack of participation and involvement in youth on problems that relate to them within community boards. And as part of this initiative, we focused on ensuring that 16 and 17-year-olds are more actively involved in their community boards, and also getting community board members to be more inclusive and also more willing to support youth being a part of their board, and also actively work to get more youth on their boards. And we also built like reports that come along with this with more information. And we also found several demographic reports. And we spoke to the Queens Community Board about this issue as well. And the Queens Borough President's Office for Youth and Young Adult Advisory Council, we're participating and connecting with as well. And also as part of this initiative, we've been connecting with the Community Board Working Group, in which we're also like devising different ways to increase involvement and achieve the overall goal of having youth on every community board in New York City. Next slide, please. Continuing on this, we've also launched a social media campaign just for overall awareness and also engagement with other youth that are a part of it or are interested in it. So from these slides, like you can see an example of one post that we've made with Bronx Community Board 3 member, Sarah, and she has shared a lot about her experience within the community board, and is also an advocate for getting more youth involved. And you can see a bit about her. And I think this overall project really highlights that there are people that are present, young people that are present within community boards that are willing to put forth effort and make changes. So there's clearly a need for their voices in these spaces, especially on councils and teams and committees that make decisions related to them. And as also part of our overall community board initiative, we've done advocacy training, which includes the project that we've been working on with the working group, which also includes presentations on how to make a more impactful rally, and also creating resources like the non-traditional post-high school pathways guide that you see on the right, which includes like, it's an overall handbook and guide for young people and how to navigate that, you know, possibly stressful and awkward time after graduation, which includes like navigating different opportunities for you for schooling or non-traditional pathways like vocational schools at times. And then also more importantly, like focusing on wellness and mental health, and also reaching out for help if needed and other important resources. And I believe that's all from me. So I'll pass it back to Irina.
Yeah, I think, can you go to the next slide as well? Yeah, so I'll pass that to Jada as well if you want to describe that more.
Sorry. So the last part for our reflection question, we want to ask, how might we use our strategy to stray away from project to project implementation to real strategic change? Sometimes like in advocacy work, it's important to really focus on being action-based, and that's what we want to focus on for the next year, and making sure that every step we take is moving towards one of our overall goals.
Thank you so much, Jada, for sharing. Also, if there are any other advocacy members who'd like to share, so whether that's me or Alexandra, feel free to unmute. But I think, you know, Jada said it perfectly in terms of what's been happening so far in advocacy. And this question really is significant to kind of move forward, because advocacy has always been this sort of project to project action oriented space. But how can we kind of make change in a way that's strategic while also creating change incrementally? So I think that's also one thing that we've been thinking about, and how we can use our strategy that we've created to implement long-term change. But I will say that the advocacy circle has been really great in terms of um, the community boards initiative, but also getting involved in other ways that are outside of the advocacy circle, which I'm very proud of. So whether that's the New York City Youth Agenda and that community boards working group that are trying to build those intergenerational alliances with young folks and adult allies in community boards, to having our members being involved within their own community boards. And so I think that we all, our advocacy circle, are very involved in various ways, even outside of our circle, which is very exciting to see. So if there's anything else that needs to be said in terms of advocacy, okay. So then how about we go to the next slide? Yeah, and then if there are any questions about advocacy, feel free to put in the chat or feel free to verbally say it out loud. Okay, so now we'll go into what community has been going with. And so surprisingly, from our last time, we used to call it membership, but now we've changed it to community so then we can build a community rather than building membership. Because first the name sounds better, like we can say that, but also it can encompass so many different things. And I think community has been very interesting and has done a lot. So I'll report for what community has been doing so far in terms of weaving community so we all can work together. So how about we go into the next slide? Okay, so community has been entirely focused on specifically this year is the launching of our youth power convenings, which is super, super exciting. And so youth power convenings happened like before I even joined YPC, and it really relaunched again this year, which was super duper exciting. And so I like to kind of relate it back to a change making space where all young people are able to convene and talk about their personal experiences and talk about how they can implement new change within their organizing. And so we launched our first in-person youth power convening on March 25th, which was at the Yaya Network space. These are some pictures that our photographer from the North Star Fund created so to show like what's been happening so far. And so for March 25th, we tried answering in our first youth power convening, how might we be radical for youth-led change? And so this was very exciting as a coordinator of the in-person youth power convening, and it really centered around discussions, it centered around community building, and it really was just a great space for young people to convene and talk about how they feel and how they can implement you know, their experiences into the work that they do. And so surprisingly, yesterday and Friday was also another youth power convening. So I couldn't include pictures because the pictures aren't ready yet, but we did have another convening yesterday and on Friday, centered around how we might use our unique slash intersectional identities and personal stories into our youth-led change. And so, this was just the first one, but we did have a second one very soon. And then you can go into the next slide. Yes, and then we also have an online version for every youth power convening for accessibility needs. And so this was from March 26th, which was from How Might We Be Radical for Youth-Led Change, that first convening. And so this was one of the vision boards that folks created in terms of how they envision radicalness, which I thought was very beautiful. And I thought, it encompasses a lot of different things, which are very important. And I will say also what's really important about our youth power convenings is that we have many wonderful co-creators who are in this space as well, but always want to shout their work and shout out the amazing co-creation that they've done, whether that's through facilitation, trying to help us find a space, et cetera, et cetera. So some of the co-creators we've had is the Youth Civics Initiative, the Peer Defense Project, NYU EJ Rock, Youth Alliance for Housing, and the Provisional World's Children's Parliament. And so these are some of the amazing co-creators we've had. And yeah, how about we go into the next question? Actually, let's go back. I want to actually pass it off to anyone who's created like the youth power convenings, how they thought about it. So whether that's Annette or who've been in this space would be great if you'd like to share more about our youth power convenings. So I'll mute myself.
Yeah, I can share a little bit about like my experience being co-facilitator. It's just been really amazing building community, and weaving community, like Arena said. And I think something that we heard a lot from the first convening was that folks really appreciated that. Like they appreciated a space where it was just, like focusing on building community. I think, like different youth organizations and like different youth who are part of different organizations, like they'll usually be like a specific cause or a specific campaign that they're focusing on. But the youth power convenings are really about like nurturing and being there for each other as youth organizers. And I feel like that's what is so unique about the space and why we were able to really build community on that. And yeah, that's what I learned.
Thank you so much for sharing. If there are any voices who would like to share again, feel free to just unmute yourself. Okay, so how about we go into the next slide? But if you have anything to say, feel free to say in the chat. And so this is also a very, very important sort of change that we've made throughout this year in terms of how we envision organizational members and member roles, which is another part of community outside of our youth power convenings. And so really, we've had so many, I think, like I remember distinctly in our last general circle meetings, we've been thinking a lot about membership and how we kind of use the word member or how can we envision the word member in all spheres. And so I think that having all that brainstorming, having all that talking, those discussions were very insightful. And we've realized we still have a lot to go in terms of thinking about membership, but we have realized a lot of important things. So I made them into bullet points so that it's helpful to just read. But really, the big one is members contribute based on capacity. So we really do want to emphasize how organizers, like as youth organizers or in general, organizers as a whole, time and capacity is so important. And so we always want to emphasize how you all have the capacity to do what you want, and capacity is really important to emphasize. And so you don't have to contribute a specific amount of hours to be an organizer. You don't have to, join every little thing to be seen as an organizer. You are an organizer because you follow our values, you follow our mission, and you contribute based on how you want to contribute. And I think that's what's really important, especially with leading with love. And like that's a really big value of ours. And so I think in general, contributing based on your capacity is one thing we really emphasized this year and emphasized actually like since the founding of YPC. And so another thing is that we are not a single organization, we are a network. And so that was one thing that we talked about a little bit previously. Deborah described more about the movement network and the structures that we've had. But to emphasize again, we are a network of people, of organizations, of individuals, and other networks coming together who all, follow that mission of youth-led collective impact. So we are not just a single organization. Everyone here, you all are part of Youth Power Coalition, whether that's through being a part of your organizational structures and anything, you all are still part of YPC because you all support our youth-led collective impact efforts. And then another thing we've changed is we are organizational members instead of partners. So usually when organizations come, like organizations come and get involved with YPC, we always used to think of them as partners, but instead you are a part of the network of YPC, thus you are an organizational member. So it's pretty self-explanatory, but I think it's always sometimes hard to distinguish as well. And I think, yeah, even if you are part of another organization, you are still a part of Youth Power Coalition as organizational members. And so, yeah, how about we go into the next slide? Okay, and so this was a question I was thinking about in terms of the future of the community circle. And so the question I put was, how might we expand our membership roles and continue our youth power convenings in a sustainable and continuous manner? And so I think membership definitely will be expanded throughout the year and throughout the next year, since we always had those conversations and those discussions before, but we really want to kind of think about it more further in the upcoming years. And we definitely love the youth power convenings. We definitely want to continue them. Now it's how do we implement them where it doesn't just have to be a YPC member starting it. It can be members from different countries, different cities, different organizations starting their own youth power convenings, and we provide the support structures needed so that they can implement their own youth power convening without like us really getting involved. So I think that's one thing that we've been thinking about, but we do want to continue those youth power convenings because they're amazing and we just love the space that it fosters. And so, yeah, how about are there any questions in terms of what I just said, in terms of what's been happening with community? Since I will say organization, like the member roles might be a little confusing, which I'm always open to answering questions on. Okay. Okay. Feel free to always say your questions in the chat and then I'll definitely answer. But yeah, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so now I will pass it to Alexandra for communications.
Yeah, so communications is a new circle that we've introduced this March. I worked with Arena to help start this, and I think that we've done a lot of substantial work. So an issue or something that we wanted to focus on was that as membership is growing, as Arena was saying, it's more and more necessary to not only to communicate, but also to make it, how can we make it the most accessible for everyone? So there's two kind of main areas that we focused on. So we focused on increasing our Instagram presence. So that's on the external communications front. So how can we, make our post one more accessible to everyone? So we started using image descriptions and fonts that were accessible to everyone and to readers on the phone, as well as how can we attract new members using our platforms. So as you can see in the slides, we've worked a lot. Also, another member, Jessie, has done a great job at designing posts to make them eye-catching, to make them accessible, to make it informative but also brief. So these are some things we've been working on on the external communications front. Now on the internal communications front, something that we've really been working on is so first of all, utilizing the hub. So I think that a big part of YPC and something that we want to continue to improve on is the Youth Power Hub. So to members and to people who are acquainted with it, it's very easy to or it's kind of self-explanatory, but for people who are new, and I know since I joined this year, it's been a little difficult to kind of figure out how it works and kind of logistics of it. So one of our missions is to get feedback and a lot of trial and error with how can we design the hub to make it accessible to everyone, to make it user-friendly, to make sure that's navigable even to non-members, just people who want to contribute to, a post or, see what we're up to. We've also started doing blog posts more often. So as you can see, we have one from Jessie. And then we also have been, working with different platforms. So I know one of them that we were experimenting with was Start Atom, which is like a website that connects multiple different, so it connects like Discord, text, I believe, Slack, a bunch of different platforms, and it's kind of one communication thread. So it makes it so that if you don't have access to Slack, if you don't have access to Discord, if you have access to a specific platform, there's not going to be a platform barrier to communicating or being a part of YPC, so that we really increase our mission of accessibility, of being visible to the public. We also have implemented new notes templates, which again furthers our mission of accessibility, of visibility, of making everything that we do open and explanatory to the public. And then, so I think that an issue that, or not an issue, but something that we've been kind of considering is how might we continue our work in meeting accessibility needs for all members. And now I will open the discussion to anyone, but specifically anyone who's participated in the communication circle, if they'd like to add on something or answer this question or give it ideas. Okay, so then I will pass it on to leadership development.
I'll go for this one. So with leadership development, the idea is developing leaders who can lead intergenerationally. And I think we'll need to revise this aim to also lead intergenerationally and lead within a movement network structure. But it's been a pretty quiet year for leadership development as its own sort of projects. But like some of the things that we did, we started a Youth Power Starter Pack, which is on the Youth Power Coalition Hub. And so as in the starter pack, anyone can see, here are the like basics of being a Youth Power organizer. Here's the grand strategy for Youth Power Coalition. Like, what does it mean? What's our mission, our vision? What are our goals? How do we handle money at Youth Power Coalition? Because there's so much of the work that we do at YPC is like living out our values and living out the world that we want to make possible. And it's hard work and it takes training. So we want to put everything that we learn out there for anyone to use. We continue to do some consulting projects. So Camelback Ventures, Educate LLC. And then what's been most exciting to me is that there have been training in other circles, like advocacy, for example, has said, oh, this is what we're doing advocacy training with within the network, and communications. Like there's been a lot of training internally on how to make things accessible. And then another thing I just realized was we do a lot of training within our meetings too, like bringing up, here's what it means to be a network leader. This is how we might handle finances. So that's the status of leadership development at the moment. And the questions that are coming up are like, how might we continuously train new organizers? There are a couple of reasons to ask this. One is when it comes to capacity and intergenerational work, we are all contributing, our lives are changing. So we always need new organizers to take on existing work and make it better, or bring in new ideas as well. So, and we're an intergenerational org, we all grow older. And so always making sure that the next generation of youth leaders are coming in, finding YPC and making it even better is a huge priority. And then how might we do training in a distributed way? Meaning, if I always think, okay, if 10,000 members join the YPC community tomorrow, like what are the structures that can be in place for everyone to get caught up, to connect with community, to learn what they need to do in order to launch amazing projects that are about increasing youth power? Like, how do we do that? Yes, go for it, Rena.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just wondering if there are anything people want to add who've been working on leadership development things. So Arena, you're actually a good person to take the next.
Okay, so how about I have no updates in terms of leadership development, but I will say definitely I can see how it's been utilized in terms of how members or the folks that are involved in YPC already have and are gaining the leadership skills. And so I think internally we've been doing great in using our hub and using our platforms to further utilize that. But yeah, Samantha.
I have something to add about this. When it comes to 10,000 members joining us tomorrow, which I'm sure will 100% happen. I know it will one day. But because YPC is so transparent and open, and we make every single thing public, it kind of reminds me of Aristotle's Poetics, in which we learn from presentation and representation. So it's learning by doing, learning by action. And Deborah, what you said about learning through our meetings is such a big part of that. And it's so underrated because it's like you don't get any warning in a way. We just automatically include you. We already just want your voice. We want your opinion, even if it's your first meeting and your first, like, technical day here. And it's being included in those rounds and making sure your voice is heard, even though, you're not really experienced with us yet. You're a new member. It still goes to show just exactly how distributed we are, because we're distributing our voice and our time and capacity for us to learn through action, through experience.
Love that. Thank you. How about we go into the next part? So, yes, it's fundraising and financial accessibility. So I'll pass it again to Samantha.
So our fundraising and financial accessibility circles have had a very big year. And I would say, honestly, we've had a very busy past few months in which a lot of our work has, really taken hold in YPC. But basically what we do with these circles is we're mobilizing resources for youth-led collective impact so we can be equitable, sustainable, and impactful. Overall, in our 2 years of official incorporation, we've increased our revenue by 67%. So we went from only having $3,000 in our first year to $97,000 in 2 years, which is this year, which is like 3,000 away from 100 grand. So that's really impressive. Yeah. So on our next slide, we have just a graph of all of our funding, and we have 90% of our funding from grantors such as the New York Foundation, North Star Foundation, and the Student Action Network. What we earn from New York Foundation and the North Star Fund are reoccurring grants. So we have the money coming in for a few years at a set time every year. And that's the majority of where our funding comes to support our core operations and to support our financial accessibility work. And that number is growing and will be growing. But eventually, with the fundraising strategy that we are going to be developing in the summer and in the next year, will eventually create a shift from being majorly supported by grantors to a balance between grantors and individual donors, and then hopefully and ideally 100% community-based with donors. On our next slide, we have a list of our accomplishments. And so we're preparing to expand a number of paid organizers. I know that majority of the people in this meeting know that this is what we're doing, but for those who are new here, what Youth Power Coalition is doing is, in expanding the number of paid organizers, we're making sure that we have not only the funding to do so, but also the systems and the practices in place to make sure that this is a long-term commitment and a long-term institution in our network. Last year, we paid Deborah as a support organizer for the first time. And being an organizer, we come to learn that time really is money, because in this space, in the organizing world, people who commit full time and even part time have to sacrifice time and effort that can be spent working a different job with a more concrete monetary compensation that will support themselves and their families, their lives, instead of committing their energy to organizing work that they may be really passionate about. Youth Power Coalition values and deeply appreciates the time and sacrifices that our organizers and supporters dedicate to our network and our movement. And in alignment with our values that we so deeply publicize and hold true to ourselves, we have to dedicate a lot of effort and work in promoting equity in all aspects, which includes financial accessibility. And while we use the word compensate to technically describe our actual paying of our organizers, our work is known as financial accessibility because we're committed to making organizing financially accessible. We want our organizers to be able to stay with us and to do the work that they're doing without having to worry about money. This movement needs to be healthy and sustainable, and that can only be accomplished in a way that guarantees organizer retention and financial freedom. In our last general circle reflection last year, and I saw this in the notes, Deborah said, paying organizers is not just about access, it's also about justice. We're led by those most impacted by inequity and therefore the ones most in need of financial resources. And that statement is still relevant today. We've been working with Maven and the Peer Defense Project, coordinated by Ricardo Stoket of Maven, to co-create a financial accessibility plan that's built in public and is radically transparent. Our work is publicized in Slack and even in the Hub, where any organizational member or person can view. Youth Power Coalition is built on common values, and a primary one is leading with love. But in doing so, we have to understand the need to make organizing financially accessible, to do this truthfully and honestly. A part of the honesty that we express is expressed in our fundraising work, in which our story has compelled grantors enough to award us reoccurring grants, which is a very big thing for us at the moment. Most recently, the New York Foundation has approved us for another wave of funding of $47,500 with $7,500 allocated to support our work for financial accessibility. Eventually, we want to move to a system and a plan, a strategy that makes sure that our network and our movement is 100% community funded, community based. We're supported by the community, we give back to the community, and it's this endless cycle of love and equity and justice that we strive for. In our next slides, we have some guiding questions that will continually remain relevant for the fundraising and financial accessibility circles. In building a sustainable network, we need organizers that are financially supported to keep this network and movement growing and healthy. And I know that I have reiterated this a lot so far, but it's just this core principle, this foundation that we need to stick to and that we dedicate and commit to our network. We do this through a lot of robust recruitment and membership and onboarding that works in a way to keep our members a part of our community and a part of our network, even if they stop actively working with us. Everyone continues to be a member of Youth Power Coalition, and our core support are organizers who continue to work to keep YPC healthy, sustainable, and abundant are going to be quote unquote compensated in our journey to make all of this work accessible. It's our long-term goal to set up the foundations and fundraising work for that Youth Power Coalition champions for equity and community-based work and a network and funding. And if anyone has anything to add in these questions or anything to reflect on, I would love to hear your contributions and your answers. But if not, we can move on.
I would add one more question, which is like, how might we incorporate our values of love and of anti-capitalism and of mutual aid, like all of how do we do that within a fundamentally unjust system that is capitalism, where there is exploitation of labor, where time is money. But I think we really, like, in our ideal society, right, everyone just has what they need in order to thrive, and that is decoupled from our, like, quote unquote productivity. So yeah, that's a question I wrestle with a lot. Like, how might we be financially sustainable and equitable, and create a new system, or within a system that is trying to squash all of that down. But we can do it.
Okay, thank you everyone for sharing. And then how about we go on to the next slide to go over global collaboration. I'll pass it to Sammy.
So the Global Collaboration Network is currently in its pilot stages. It's slowly being molded into a truly engaging and sustainable global network, and with the primary goals of actually eventually forming a global summit that promotes the concepts that YPC so morally projects. Though we were originally planning on not having an exact theme around what we actually want to promote in the global network, we have recently been focusing a lot on youth leadership and actually the possibility of eventually institutionalizing it. Currently, the network has the partners of YPC, PW, CP, and Leaders Unlocked. So it's primarily based in India, UK, and the United States, though we are hoping to expand this further. We are currently doing a lot of brainstorming around how to actually establish this global network and make it sustainable, and have like an annual summit where the community can commune and actually promote ideas and collaborate in order to make sure that values of YPC are being promoted institutionally across our networks. I'll pass it on to Deborah to see if she would like to add anything further, anything I've missed.
Yeah, and speaking from I feel like Youth Power Coalition now, I mean, our foundation is rooted in New York City, and now we're like have these global collaborations, which is amazing. And I think what's most exciting for me, speaking from the New York context, is that when we work globally, it's really aligned with our value, our like idea of all young people being equipped to thrive. And it also really makes accessibility even that much more necessary, because we're accessible across languages, time zones, tech, cultural differences. And so, but those are the same things that exist within New York City itself too. Like New York City, we are all of the globe in like some small islands in just the United States context. So I just want to add that it's been pretty exciting and interesting to like go through the process of building a network, again, but this time at the global scale.
Okay, so how about we go on to the next slide in terms of you all. So I know that a lot has been said in terms of what's been happening with our circles, but I would love to hear in general from our organizational members and folks who are involved in YPCU based on their varying capacities. Do you all have any reports? So whether that's describing how you've been involved, how YPC has been like for you, and how you've been involved in general. So how about I will mute myself, but if anyone would like to just share, feel free to raise your hand. Yes, go ahead, Michael.
Hey, hey everyone, this is Michael. One small thing to share, well, two small things to share. One is a look back, one is a look ahead. So the look back is that the work on compensation is really great to hear the progress. And just as some insight, in the mission circle, we have been doing some thinking on the compensation piece as well. To be well-resourced is one of the values of YPC, and to think about how to do that in a distributive way. And when I say distributive, I don't want to use jargon, but distributive that we're able to compensate people in that support network. I think I saw in the chart earlier, being able to support people there, and just how to do that in a fair and equitable way, because a lot of the systems for nonprofits make it challenging to do that. The systems for nonprofits make it challenging to be flexible in how you compensate people. So like there's a lot of thinking and work that goes into how do we live out our values? And we want to be nimble, we want to be flexible, we want to be agile, we want to be creative, and we want to meet people where they're at. And so some of the work on compensation is really important because it helps us set a new paradigm, set a new example in the world for how to do this stuff. And so, you know, we also feel like we're a part of creating something new and powerful. That's one. I hope Otter was able to transcribe that. The second thing is a bit of a look ahead. In the mission circle, it's kind of a membership update. We're going to be looking for new mission circle members. One of the things that the mission circle, and me and Samantha are in that circle along with Arena and Deborah, one of the things in the mission circle is trying to bring more people in. And so you'll see some communications about that come out. You'll see some recruitment for that come out. But we've been working on how do we recruit new members to our mission circle and just continue to live out our values. So that's just two things that I wanted to share with the group. So if you hear from me or others in the future, it'll be about that.
Thank you so much for sharing. Are there any other reports that folks would like to share out?
I'd like to add here also, remember when we say YPC is not an organization, it's this entire network. So everyone who's here also comes with, and I am going to put someone on the spot, like Annette, for example, EJ Rock, like the stuff that you are doing there is also a part of that story in what's happening with youth power. So I was just wondering, is there anything cool we need to know about from you, Annette, and then maybe have an opportunity for every other participant to share as well.
Yeah. Thank you for calling me in. For the community circle and specifically talking about the youth power convenings, I feel like our mission has really been to our goal is to build that network, that strong network between youth organizers and youth organizations. And I think I was talking to somebody from CACF, a youth member from CACF yesterday, and he was talking about how that was one of their goals too, right? How do you, I feel like there's many youth organizations across the city and even across the world, right? But how do we build solidarity with each other and build that community? And Deborah, Arena, and I have been talking about how do we have those convenings also play into contribute into the youth power hub, and how do we add more trainings to the virtual youth power hub, but also how do we have that space where I really like what I think it was Arena you who said it's not just one or two people facilitating each convening, right? We want it to be a space so that any youth organizer or any youth organization and affiliated or not with an organization, any youth can come into the space and lead a training or lead a convening. So I think that has really I guess that's my report on the convening, finding a way to build that stronger network between youth orgs, and also in that, how do we build more resources that youth organizers are identifying and really put it together so that the home is the network, right, of all those resources, and a young person can feel that it's accessible to them and they feel open to it. You get me? They want to step into those resources and use those resources.
Yes, I definitely understand especially with community, because I think we've all been having those conversations and how we can further utilize different ways of Youth Power Coalition, whether that's resources, monetary funds, etc., so that we can build that network